Hey guys, welcome back to Form Check Friday. Here, let me make myself nice and big for ya. Welcome back to Form Check Friday. This is the show where we take your user submitted videos, we put them up here on this screen beside me, and I'm gonna pick them apart a little bit. I'm gonna take a look at how you guys are lifting, some of the mechanics, try to give you some recommendations in terms of training and cueing to try to make you guys more efficient lifters. Now, I've had a lot of people actually who haven't even been selected, but who have seen faults that are similar to things that they do in their training, and it seems like people have learned a lot from this. So if you're interested in bettering your technique for the sake of efficiency, getting more weight on the bar, being more consistent and repeatable with your technique, then you've come to the right place. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you guys want to submit your videos, please send those via email to formcheckfriday@gmail.com. No other email. If they go to other emails, they unfortunately won't be eligible for the selection for Form Check Friday. So if you want the chance to be featured, go ahead and submit them to formcheckfriday@gmail.com. Another thing, we have some seminars coming up in the UK. We have Basingstoke just outside of London, April 25th, 26th weekend. And then we have Edinburgh at Elysium, Edinburgh on May 4th, I believe, the Saturday. And we have a second one on the Sunday at Physique and Power in Glasgow. If you guys are interested, head over to calgarybarbell.com and click on the coaching shop or the Form Check store, and that's where our seminar tickets are gonna be. With that being said, we're gonna dive right into it. So ready yourselves, pepper your Anguses, and here we go. So our first submission comes from, and I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, there were a lot of characters in the name that I'm not used to seeing, don't understand. Anyways, that's my disclaimer. Yigitkan Ustek, and hopefully that's even remotely close to how your name is actually pronounced. Oh, get some volume. Sorry, guys. And here we go. We're gonna take a look at Yigitkan's deadlift. All right, so let's see. Looks like we're pulling conventional. Set up, he's jostling shoulders around, trying to make sure he's getting his lats nice and set. Good. Very good. Interesting technique with the shoulders. There's a guy locally, Luke McRae, I think his name is. He does that with his shoulders too, kind of shrugs them and pulls them down like that. It's not necessarily something I would recommend, but if that helps you get your shoulders set and helps you get your lats sort of working properly or braced properly, and it gets your shoulder blades into the right position, which it looks like it is here. You're doing a good job of positioning with the back. And what I mean by that is you can see that sort of jostling of his shoulder blades there. And what he's trying to do is he's just trying to drive his shoulder blades down his back. Because anytime we can shorten the distance from here to here, this is the joint producing the force, and this is where we're sort of connecting into the bar, right? So anytime we can shorten this distance by pulling this shoulder blade down, that's going to create a little bit of a better lever for you to lift with. So again, not necessarily something I would recommend, but looks like you're doing a good job once you do get locked in of keeping that upper back relatively locked. The only other thing there, and we can see this specifically at lockout right here, I want everybody to just kind of watch the knees a little bit here when we get to the lockout. Now it looks like we're not necessarily fully locked out there. If you were in a competition, you might end up getting some red lights for soft knees, soft lockout. And what I'd like to see there is for your lockout, for you to use a little bit more. I want you to think more about your quads, think more about your knees. That was a bit better rep. And think about really squeezing the quads, locking the knees out, and making sure we don't have that sort of wobbling at the top end. I think that's probably gonna go a long ways for you. Other than that though, everything looks really good. It looks like we started to kind of lose a little bit, I'll clear that off of there, a little bit of back position right as we sort of initiate the lift. We start to lose a little bit of this on this last rep. You can see it kind of goes, but I don't think that on the last rep of a fairly difficult looking set, this is maybe a 9.5 RP if I had to judge it myself. So I wouldn't be too worried about losing that back position. I think it's just one of those things you're kind of pushing. And if this is the last rep of the last set, we see a little bit of technique breakdown, it's not a big deal. But yeah, overall, really good deadlift. You can see that his hips aren't shooting up. When he initiates the lift, his hips are generally staying in place. We're getting good sort of knee extension to start the lift and then pushing the hips through. Nice and patient off the floor, pulling the slack out. So a lot of good things. I would work on, again, just making sure you're locking those knees a little bit better at lockout. Make that knee lock a little bit more convincing. Our next one comes from Tristan Palmer. He said he's just starting out with powerlifting, been at it for about a month now, and wants to compete in the future. This is his 5th set of a 5x5 at 160 kilos. Feels like he's leaning forward out of the hole, but he's not sure if he is or not. Thanks for the help if I make it on an episode. Well, Tristan, you've made it, my man. Let's take a look here. Cool gym. Got the Dragon Ball Z art on the walls, Rogue kilo plates. All right. So it looks like a pretty damn good squat to me. I think we might be getting a little bit lean forward out of the bottom here. Couple things I think I would get you to try. Number one, this bar looks really high up on your back. I would try to get that bar down just a little bit. Hopefully you guys can kind of see my mark there. Not a whole lot, but I would try to see how a low bar position feels for you. That right there is going to be pretty high up on the traps. I would say that's high bar, and I would try a low bar position. The other thing is, as you're going through the squat, it really looks like we're trying to kind of reach that chest up, and we're seeing a lot of extension through the back. Now, I think if we could create some tension through the anterior here by sort of clamping the ribs down and trying to keep this right here from opening up. So we want to keep this angle, these two lines, we're talking about the hips and the ribs, we want to keep them relatively parallel. In this case, this is what I'm recommending anyways. And I think what's happening is we're getting a little bit into this sort of position where these ribs are tilting up. We're going into a lot of lumbar extension. And I think as you get out of the bottom position, what's happening is we're then going back into a bit more of a neutral position. Out of the bottom, at least, we can see this flattening out here, which looks actually good to me. It looks like we're getting back into a bit more of a neutral range position, and then we're extending back through the top. So the reason it feels like you're falling forward, if I had to guess, would be that we're too extended to start off with. As we get into the bottom, we hit a neutral position, and that shift from overextended to neutral is causing you to feel like you're falling forward. Now, chances are you're not falling forward. Sorry, my trap's a little messed up. I don't think you're falling forward per se, but I do think that if you initiated the squat with a little bit more forward lean, a little bit more of a sort of ribs down bracing pattern, and a little bit of a lower bar position, we wouldn't feel like that. Now, I also see on this last rep, I want everybody to tune in right here on the feet and just watch as we hit the hole on this last rep. Watch how far forward we go. We see those feet sort of roll inwards, and we see that weight come up off the heels. We're getting a little bit forward on the toes, and I think that's just part and parcel with all of the other things that I mentioned here. All in all, I do want to really reinforce that you have a good solid squat here. Your hitting depth, your back angle is relatively consistent. Your upper back is braced well against the bar. We're not seeing a whole lot wrong here, but I think there are a couple things we can tweak and try to make just a little bit better. So Tristan, those things would be keeping even pressure on your feet, trying to maybe lower that bar position a little bit, and lastly, let's work on that brace of trying to keep the ribs sort of pulled down on top of the abs, and not necessarily reaching the chest up so high. And that would be my advice. That would be my sort of list of things to try. Now, anytime I talk about the sort of technique tips that I have for you guys, none of this stuff is concrete. Anytime I'm coaching a person, anytime I'm talking to a person about technique, I'm gonna be giving them essentially a number of things to try. Now, in some cases, these things might help a lot. They might, you know, make you more efficient right off the hop. In other cases, it might take a while before they start feeling more comfortable. And in other cases, they might not be the right recommendation at all. So take what I'm saying here with a grain of salt. This isn't necessarily biblical or anything like that. And you don't have to take everything at face value, but this is a bunch of stuff that you can try if you notice some of these things happening in your own lifts. Our next one here comes from Alex M. And Alex says he's 18 years old, 187 pounds. The weight he's got on the bar is 325 for a triple. He's got pretty long femurs in relation to his torso, so he's been experimenting with a wide stance with toes pointed out. His squats feel really weird, but on video everything seems to be fine and the bar path doesn't look too bad. Also, I've been experiencing some lower back pressure, and he thinks that might be due to hyperextending at the bottom of the squat and can't find any solution to this. Well, let's see if we can take a look and maybe pick out some things that are going on there to help you squat a little bit better. All right, Alex, let's see what you got here, man. So kind of a tough angle because the plates are actually covering up your whole torso. So everything looks pretty good. This is the only video you sent? Man, yeah, it's really hard to tell what's going on with your back here because of how the plates cover things up. If I had to guess, it looks like we're in a little bit of flexion to start off with in the low back. Now, flexion in the low back is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're feeling a little bit of undue pressure there, just sort of adjusting how that's moving throughout the lift might change how it feels during the lift. So I would say try to go for a little bit more extension through that back and out of the bottom. But other than that, like, knee travel looks good, depth is good, feet look pretty good. And I mean, the rest of it I kind of can't see. So with the limited glimpse that I have here, I would say the biggest thing to do is work on not even out of the rack. So here, this position's probably fine, but as you start to descend, if we're still in flexion here, that's gonna mean that when we hit the bottom, the bar is gonna kind of roll, the torso's gonna change. Yeah, and we saw that just a little bit there. Let me slow this down. So right here, let's keep an eye on this bar here. So now, as Alex comes out of the bottom, we're gonna see that bar just roll slightly forward. See how we're just a little bit ahead of that mark there? And that bar kind of tilts just a little bit, putting you into even a little bit more flexion. Now, the pressure that you're feeling is likely just your lower back doing work. So I don't think it's anything to be worried about. But if you're feeling the sort of weak link in your squat is your back, I think it's because your back's losing position. So what I would say is, again, as you hit the bottom and as you sort of achieve depth in the squat, make sure that you are pulling those lats down your back and just try to maintain a nice sort of neutral range position. If we're in a little bit of flexion here, then when that bar has to sort of overcome inertia out of the bottom, it's gonna push forward and cause that flexion to be exaggerated, which is going to greatly reduce your sort of mechanical advantage against the bar. So that's my 2 cents on that, Alex. Hopefully that helps you out, man. Next up, we have Kevin Rahill. He's doing some deadlifts here. Sent an email for bench press and figured he should send squat and deadlift too. Edited the videos to get them in landscape for you. Hope that helped. He's 26, 5'10", 175. Played football through high school. Never formally trained the deadlift. For the last 2 or 3 years, been getting more into powerlifting style training. plans on doing a meet in 2019. Been most successful and strongest with sumo. Feels the best with deadlift, but knows that there's room to improve. I'd like to know if there's other things to tweak in his form to ensure he gets white lights in a meet and to improve his strength. Awesome, Kevin. Let us take a look. Really good, really good. Second rep, probably even a little bit better than the first. Excellent, excellent. That might have been one of your best reps. So the first rep here, we're probably pushing the knees just a little bit too far forward. So we're seeing those knees travel a little bit too far forward. And we actually made a video that's gonna come out next week. Depends on when this video drops. But it looks like you're trying to get your hips too close to the bar. And what that's gonna do is obviously the femur is connected at both ends here. So if you move your hips closer to the bar, the knee's gonna come forward a little bit. So with the knee too far over the bar, let's just watch what happens as he starts the pull. And I betcha we're gonna see everything kind of kick back just a little bit. As we initiate the lift, there. So that's actually a bit of a stronger position there than this one. So we're sitting a little bit too far, too low, and you'll also notice he's doing a good job of keeping this locked in, but we could have had these pulled down, and when I say these, I mean his shoulder blades. Could have the shoulder blades a little bit more depressed when we started, as opposed to just seeing them shift there. So I wouldn't be scared of a higher hip position. It looks like on this third rep, which is one I really liked. Let's take a look. Pulls in, and we notice the knee angle. I'm just gonna try to mark really neatly and nicely the knee angle there versus this first rep. See how much further forward we are in the knee angle? But by the time the bar comes off the floor, look, right about there, that's where the knee angle is. So let's try to make that starting position a little bit more consistent from rep to rep. It looks like on that first one, you're trying to get maybe your hips too close to the bar. Leave those hips out behind you. And another thing I want you to try to work on is just getting a tiny bit more extension through here. Now, if you look very closely right here, we're seeing just a tiny little bit of flexion. And I think under heavy load, it's gonna put you in more flexion. And then it's gonna make it really tough to lock that bar out. So we get through to the top, and that flexion is sort of the last thing we have to pull through. See how we're kind of locking the hips there, and then the back comes through there. Here, again, as we start, we're kind of just in the tiniest little bit of flexion here. And again, that's something that we're having to kind of sort out at the top. This is a really great angle, by the way, to be able to see, especially for the sumo deadlift. Now on this rep, it looks like your back is in just a little bit better extension. Again, I told you before, I really like the knee position and what you're doing with your overall positioning here. So on this third one, we notice the hips lock the hips lock the back through, as opposed to the hips locking first. So this one, again, really good extension and a nice smooth lockout. Another thing I want you to watch out for, and let's see if we're doing this. Yes. So I would try to get you to lock the knees almost a little bit earlier. So as you're getting the bar past the knees, what's happening is right about here, you're starting to extend at the hips. Now, what I would probably recommend is finishing the knee extension first. So the knees are gonna finish through here. Sorry, I'm not excellent at illustrating this. The knees are gonna finish through here. The lats are gonna make sure that the bar stays close and doesn't pop out this way as the knees finish. And then the hips are gonna finish last. So what we're seeing here is you're starting to extend the hips before the knees are completely locked. Actually, that rep looks pretty good. We're not seeing it. It's, again, tough to say with the plate over the knee, but generally speaking, timing-wise, that's something we want to try to cultivate is to get those knees locking ever so slightly before the hips. Yeah. Overall, man, looks really, really good. There's a little bit of consistency issues with your starting position. I think trying to keep yourself back behind the bar just a tiny bit more, like you do on these later reps, there again, really good. And trying to hold just a tiny bit more flexion, or sorry, extension in the lower back is going to be really, really helpful. It looks like these last few reps, the extension and the back position looked way better. Like that looks like a great rep. Again, pulling back a bit too early though. Try and stay over the bar. Let's see if I can illustrate this here. So what we want is we want everything to come straight up until the bar is almost at lockout and then pull back. And what's happening here is as the bar is coming up, he's kind of pulling it back a little bit too early. Let's see if I can show it. So here, he's starting to pull back there. Now what I would want you to do is keep that shoulder here. Instead of pulling the shoulders back by extending the hips, I would try to get you to keep pushing, extend the knees first so that we're straight through, keeping the shoulders locked down with the lats, and then pull through at sort of the last second almost with the hips. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And hopefully I'm not going too in depth here. Hopefully this level of analysis is helpful. That's Kevin. And lastly, we have, we have Kim Daniel. Hello Bryce, my name is Daniel and I'm from Toronto. I was having a hard time getting good form in my conventional deadlift, but I've been watching numerous videos from your channel and other channels on YouTube and got to the point where I am now. In my eyes, it seems like a decent form, but I would like to hear from a professional powerlifter standpoint to make my form perfect. Thank you so much for your commitment and dedication to making many informative videos that help me a lot with my lift. So one thing that I do want to point out is that we don't necessarily want perfectionism. That's something that can be tough and potentially harmful as an athlete, and starting to worry about any rep that creates deviation from technique can sort of be counterproductive. And if we worry too much about every rep being perfect and not seeing any deviation and get really upset and sort of expect things to go wrong when we see deviation, it can actually increase your risk for injury and pain experience. So just be conscious of that when you throw things around like having perfect technique. It looks really good. You got a long torso, relatively short femurs. It looks like not necessarily the best built for conventional. I would probably advise you to try some sumo because it looks like you're built for it here. But in terms of your conventional lift, looks pretty good. I would maybe try to get a little bit wider in the stance, because right now it's putting you in a bit of a stiff-legged position just because you have short femurs and such a long torso that it's putting you out over the bar just because of your leverages. So first off, try sumo. And secondly, I think just everything you're doing here looks good. It looks like you're trying to maintain as much extension as you can. You're trying to be relatively push focused off the floor. And what I mean by that is that we're focusing on that knee extension first, and knee extension as a means of getting the bar moving off the floor while trying to maintain a somewhat silent hip and back angle. So I'd say you're doing everything right there. I think that conventional might just be a tough lift for you. The other thing is if your grip is really wide, it looks like you might be, like that's kind of what a person with better leverages with their snatch grip conventional deadlift might look like. So I would say if you can, try to narrow that grip and or widen that stance to get a little bit better. Oh, the mic's sneaking into the shot here. Shh, don't tell Dylan. Yeah, so just try to get a little bit better leverage against that bar. And one of the ways you do that might be just trying some sumo deadlifts. All right, that is it for us today. Thank you guys for tuning in, guys and girls and gals. If you have any questions about anything you saw today, if you have any critiques of your own, or want to discuss any of the cues that I used here, feel free to leave a comment in the comments section below. Leave a like if you liked it. Share it with your friends. If maybe you got featured and you want to show off, let us know. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.